Before Diana married Charles, the woman in her family who knew the palace best reportedly warned that royal life might not suit her. Lady Fermoy had spent decades beside the Queen Mother. She understood the household's routines, humor, silences, and demands from inside. Yet no public recording of that warning exists, and no original letter has emerged. The words survive through later biographical accounts, not a document made at the time. What makes them difficult to dismiss is what happened next. Diana entered the royal family, mastered the public role, and still found herself isolated inside the private one. Lady Fermoy may have recognized the mismatch. Understanding it did not mean she could stop it. That did not make her a prophet. It did not mean she knew Charles still carried unresolved feelings for Camilla, that the marriage would collapse, or that Diana would one day speak publicly about her unhappiness. It meant something narrower, and in some ways more painful. The woman in Diana's family who knew the court most intimately may also have recognized that familiarity with royalty was not the same as being suited to a royal marriage. Three versions of Lady Fermoy are now often mixed together. One is the grandmother who reportedly warned Diana. Another is the supposed matchmaker who helped the Queen Mother place Charles and Diana together. The third is the stern instructor portrayed in The Crown, drilling a young bride in curtsies, precedence, silence, and self-control. These versions overlap just enough to feel convincing. They are not equally supported by evidence. The documented Lady Fermoy was already a formidable woman before Diana was born. Ruth Sylvia Gill came from a prosperous Scottish family and developed an identity rooted in music, public organization, and social duty. She trained as a pianist under Alfred Cortot, the celebrated French musician, and built a serious connection to concert performance. Long before the public knew her as Princess Diana's grandmother, audiences in Norfolk knew her as a woman who could bring musicians, patrons, venues, and civic ambition together. That earlier life matters because royal biographies often flatten women once a more famous relative appears. Ruth becomes Diana's grandmother, just as Cynthia Spencer becomes Diana's other grandmother. But Ruth's life was not waiting for Diana to give it meaning. She was a performer, organizer, wife, mother, widow, courtier, and founder, whose own network of influence had been established long before the royal wedding of 1981. In 1931, Ruth married Maurice Roche, the fourth Baron Fermoy. He had political and local responsibilities in Norfolk, and the family lived within the Sandringham world, including at Park House on the royal estate. Their marriage placed Ruth near a landscape where country society, parliamentary life, royal service, shooting parties, music, and local ceremony repeatedly brought the same families together. The Fermoy had 3 children. Their daughter Frances would become the mother of Diana. That relationship eventually placed Ruth at the center of one of the most painful family divisions in Diana's childhood. Yet in the early years, Ruth's public reputation developed less through family controversy than through music and civic work. In 1951, she launched the first King's Lynn Festival. Its guiding ambition was simple and demanding, nothing but the best. The festival brought serious music and performance to Norfolk, using historic buildings and royal connections without reducing culture to decoration. Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, opened the restored venue associated with the first festival and became a long-term patron. Music also gave Ruth an identity beyond aristocratic obligation. Performance demands discipline that cannot be inherited through title. A pianist must practice, listen, control timing, recover from mistakes, and serve the music without disappearing inside it. Those habits do not explain every later choice Ruth made, but they help us understand why she was more than a social ornament attached to the Queen Mother. Her connection to Queen Elizabeth developed through the close Norfolk world shared by the Fermoy and the royal family. Maurice Fermoy joined royal shooting circles, and Ruth became a friend of Queen Elizabeth. Their relationship grew over years before Ruth formally joined the household. By the time an appointment came, she was not entering a mysterious palace as an unknown woman. She already understood the social language surrounding the court. In 1956, Ruth became an extra woman of the bedchamber to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The title sounds intimate and archaic, but by the 20th century, it described a formal position within the female household. An extra woman of the bedchamber could be called upon to support the Queen Mother at engagements, during visits, and within the social and ceremonial routines that surrounded her public life. The role was not that of a personal servant in the ordinary sense, nor did it give Ruth political authority. It placed her among trusted female attendants selected for discretion, reliability, social competence, and familiarity with royal expectations. She might accompany, receive, assist, observe, and help an event move smoothly. She was close enough to understand the rhythm of the household, but not entitled to direct the institution. In 1960, she was promoted to Woman of the Bedchamber. She would remain in that position until her death in 1993. More than 3 decades of service followed the promotion, added to the 4 years she had already spent as an extra woman of the bedchamber. Her court life therefore covered the Queen Mother's long widowhood, the transformation of royal media, and the rise and collapse of Diana's marriage. Lady Fermoy was often on duty at Clarence House. She also took part in the Queen Mother's more social weekends at Royal Lodge, where conversation, readings, music, and carefully arranged hospitality belonged to the rhythm of the household. She accompanied the Queen Mother on private visits abroad and helped connect the King's Lynn Festival with the late summer world of Sandringham. The closeness was real, but it must be described accurately. Ruth was a friend and courtier, not a hidden minister. She knew how the Queen Mother's household functioned. She knew its humor, its habits, its expectations, and the social codes that governed who spoke, who waited, who accompanied, and who belonged. That kind of knowledge can be deep without becoming political power. That is where Lady Fermoy's story becomes emotionally difficult. The woman who understood royal duty so well also stood inside a family marked by separation, custody conflict, and lasting resentment. Her daughter Frances married John Spencer in 1954. He was older, heir to the Spencer title, and connected to the royal household. They built a family at Park House, where Diana was born in 1961. The marriage did not remain stable. By the late 1960s, Frances and John Spencer were separating, and their dispute became a painful legal and family battle. Frances wanted a different life and formed a relationship with Peter Shand Kidd. John sought custody of the children. The conflict placed Diana, her sisters, and her younger brother inside a struggle they had not created. Lady Fermoy did not remain neutral. She testified against her daughter Frances. Contemporary and later accounts agree that her evidence assisted John Spencer's position in the custody dispute. Frances lost custody of the children, and the rupture between mother and daughter became open and enduring. It is tempting to assign one simple motive. Ruth has been described as defending aristocratic order, protecting the Spencer title, siding with a son-in-law whose social position she respected, or punishing a daughter who had left her marriage. Those interpretations may contain part of the truth, but the public record does not provide a single private statement in which Ruth fully explains her reasoning. What can be said is enough. When forced to stand in a legal conflict involving her daughter and grandchildren, Lady Fermoy gave evidence against her own child. The decision had consequences beyond the courtroom. It deepened Francis's loss, altered the family's emotional structure, and helped create a history in which Diana would grow up between homes, loyalties, and competing adult narratives. Before Diana was asked to balance marriage against duty, her mother had already experienced a family division in which Ruth stood on the opposite side. That parallel should not be made too neat. Francis's marriage was not Diana's marriage, and John Spencer was not Prince Charles. But the emotional pattern matters. A woman leaves an unhappy union, the family divides, and Lady Fermoy's public position aligns with continuity rather than rebellion. This does not prove that Ruth always placed the crown above blood or that she lacked affection for Francis and Diana. Human loyalty is rarely that clean. A mother can love a daughter and still believe the daughter has acted wrongly. A grandmother can care about children while making a choice that causes them pain. The difficulty lies in the gap between intention and consequence. For Diana, the custody battle was not an abstract scandal. It shaped childhood. She and her siblings lived with the result of adult decisions, and the memory of their mother's departure became part of Diana's emotional history. Lady Fermoy's role in that dispute, therefore, complicates any later image of her as the grandmother who simply tried to save Diana from royal life. She may have recognized danger in Diana's future marriage. That does not erase the earlier family wound. A correct warning does not transform the person who gives it into a perfect protector. Lady Fermoy could understand the court and still failed to provide the kind of emotional safety Diana needed from her family. Diana nevertheless grew up near royalty in ways that can be underestimated. Park House stood on the Sandringham estate. Her father served in royal roles. Her paternal grandmother, Cynthia Spencer, had spent 35 years serving Queen Elizabeth and then the Queen Mother. Her maternal grandmother, Lady Fermoy, belonged to the Queen Mother's household from 1956 onward. Diana was therefore not a complete outsider suddenly introduced to titles, country houses, or royal ceremony. She understood deference, social hierarchy, and the existence of the court as part of the world around her. She had seen royalty at a distance and grown up among families who treated royal service as familiar. But familiarity is not preparation for marriage. Knowing when to curtsy does not teach a young woman how to survive emotional loneliness. Recognizing titles does not explain how a household reacts when the heir's marriage becomes unstable. Growing up on a royal estate does not reveal what happens when every private insecurity becomes newspaper material. This distinction sits at the center of Lady Fermoy's alleged warning. If later biographical accounts are accurate, she was not warning Diana about one technical failure of etiquette. She was warning about compatibility, lifestyle, and sense of humor. Those words point not to a missed curtsy, but to an entire culture. A household has routines that outsiders can learn. A family has jokes, silences, habits, loyalties, and emotional codes that are much harder to acquire. The royal family's public ceremonies could be taught. Its private way of dealing with tension, affection, criticism, and vulnerability could not be mastered through a short course. Lady Fermoy had observed that culture for decades. She had seen the Queen Mother's court value restraint, courtesy, stamina, hierarchy, and the ability to continue through private discomfort. She knew that royal life expected people to subordinate individual emotion to the appearance of continuity. Diana, by contrast, would later become known for seeking emotional connection openly and for struggling when private suffering was met with institutional reserve. It would be easy to read the entire future into the warning. That would turn Ruth into a prophet after the fact. Nothing in the reported words mentions Camilla, adultery, separation, bulimia, interviews, or divorce. The warning speaks only of difference. It suggests a grandmother who saw cultural incompatibility, not one who possessed a secret map of every disaster to come. The question of matchmaking makes the story more complicated. Because Lady Fermoy was close to the Queen Mother, and because Diana later married the Queen Mother's grandson, the public naturally imagined the two older women arranging the match. It offered a satisfying explanation. Two grandmothers, two households, one dynastic plan. The social circumstances made the theory plausible. Ruth knew the Queen Mother well. Diana came from a suitable aristocratic family. Charles required a bride who could meet expectations surrounding background, public presentation, and succession. Diana was young, unmarried, and already known within overlapping circles. The pieces appeared to fit too neatly to be accidental. Yet proximity is not proof of planning. Lady Fermoy denied that she and the Queen Mother had arranged the marriage. When asked about the claim, she dismissed it as untrue. Her denial does not tell us that she played no social role whatsoever or that she never discussed Diana with anyone. It does mean a documentary account should not present the matchmaking story as established fact. The surviving record supports something less theatrical. Charles and Diana moved within connected aristocratic and royal networks. Diana's sister Sarah had already known Charles socially. Diana encountered him through family settings and royal country life. Once interest developed, many people could see why the match looked suitable. None of that requires a secret plan between Lady Fermoy and the Queen Mother. The matchmaking legend also conflicts with the reported warning. If Ruth had deliberately engineered the marriage, why would later biographical accounts portray her telling Diana that royal life might not suit her? The contradiction does not automatically prove the warning or disprove every form of encouragement. It does show why the story cannot be reduced to one confident sentence. Lady Fermoy's alleged warning enters this uncertain space through later biography. The best-known version came through Diana's account as presented by Andrew Morton. In that retelling, Ruth told her granddaughter that the royal family's sense of humor and lifestyle were different, and that she did not think it would suit her. The wording is memorable because it is restrained. It does not sound like a sensational prediction. Ruth does not say the marriage will certainly fail. She does not accuse Charles of deception. She does not name another woman. She identifies difference and unsuitability, the very things a courtier might notice before a romantic young woman could fully understand them. But the source remains important. The public does not possess a recording of Ruth speaking those words. There is no known original letter carrying the warning in her handwriting. The line reached readers through later biographical testimony connected to Diana's recollection. It should therefore be introduced as an account, not performed as if a microphone had captured the scene. What might Ruth have understood? She knew the Queen Mother's circle valued resilience, ceremony, continuity, and a particular form of humor shaped by class generation and shared history. She had watched people remain composed through grief and scandal. She knew that private emotion was expected to be managed, not displayed as a claim upon the institution. Diana came from aristocracy, but her emotional needs were her own. She was young, sensitive to rejection, eager for reassurance, and entering a marriage after a childhood marked by parental separation. Those qualities did not make her weak or unsuited to public service. They made emotional security inside marriage especially important. Ruth may also have understood that humor can define belonging. Shared jokes reveal who knows the rules and who remains outside them. What feels affectionate inside one family can feel dismissive or cruel to someone without the same history. The phrase sense of humor may sound minor beside adultery and constitutional pressure, but it can mark a serious cultural divide. Lifestyle carried an even wider meaning. Royal life was not simply palaces, clothes, travel, and ceremony. It involved relentless schedules, controlled access, staff, hierarchy, separation, country routines, public scrutiny, and the expectation that duty would continue regardless of private feeling. Ruth had lived near that system long enough to know its demands. Yet understanding the demand did not give her the power to stop the wedding. By the time a royal engagement becomes public, it belongs to more than two people. Families celebrate, newspapers build a national story, souvenirs appear, the institution prepares. Doubt begins to look like disloyalty, and hesitation becomes harder to express without causing humiliation. Lady Fermoy was not Diana's legal guardian. She could advise, but she could not command. She could recognize a mismatch without possessing evidence strong enough to persuade everyone else. A warning about temperament can seem vague when placed beside a prince, a public romance, and the promise of becoming Princess of Wales. Diana herself was not simply carried to the altar without choice. She accepted the proposal and participated in the courtship, even as later accounts describe doubt and distress. Her youth, family expectations, public pressure, and incomplete knowledge shaped that choice. Recognizing those pressures does not require erasing her agency. Lady Fermoy's own position was divided. She was Diana's grandmother, but she was also a long-serving member of the Queen Mother's household. If concern developed, whom could she challenge? The Queen Mother? Charles? Diana's father? The Spencer family? A courtier trained in discretion may find it easier to offer one private warning than to create a public confrontation. That is the central tragedy of understanding a system from inside. Knowledge does not always create freedom. Sometimes it creates a clearer awareness of how little can be changed without breaking every relationship around you. Ruth knew the hierarchy. The same knowledge that allowed her to recognize danger may also have taught her the cost of opposing it. This is where The Crown offers a more dramatic and visually satisfying version. In the series, Lady Fermoy becomes a stern instructor who prepares Diana for royal life. She teaches rank, curtsies, movement, restraint, and the order in which members of the family must be greeted. The scenes turn an abstract process into something viewers can see. The portrayal is believable because Ruth possessed the necessary knowledge. She had served the Queen Mother for decades. She understood precedence, ceremony, and household behavior. She was also Diana's grandmother. If anyone in the family could have offered practical guidance, Lady Fermoy was an obvious candidate, but plausibility is not proof. No strong public evidence establishes that the lessons occurred in the exact form shown on screen. The gestures, corrections, dialogue, and training sessions are dramatic constructions unless supported by a contemporary source. The series compresses Diana's preparation into scenes that reveal character and tension. It should not be treated as a documentary record. The distinction matters because the fictional lessons can subtly change Ruth's role. On screen, she appears to help transform Diana into a suitable royal bride. In later biographical accounts, however, she is remembered as questioning whether the life would suit Diana at all. One version trains the bride to fit the system. The other recognizes that fitting may be impossible. The Crown also encourages viewers to imagine that etiquette was Diana's main problem. It was not. Diana learned public duty quickly and became exceptionally effective at connecting with crowds, patients, children, and people excluded from conventional royal attention. Her deepest problems were not failures of courtesy or precedence. They arose from marriage, emotional isolation, health, loyalty, and the pressure of becoming a global symbol. Lady Fermoy's knowledge of etiquette could therefore offer only limited protection. She might explain the order of a room. She could not make Charles love in the way Diana needed. She might teach when to speak. She could not prevent private pain from becoming public conflict. She could describe the household's customs. She could not make its emotional culture compatible with her granddaughter. The relationship between grandmother and granddaughter was further complicated by the old wound involving Frances. Diana knew that Ruth had testified against her mother. Even if she did not understand every legal detail as a child, the division belonged to the family atmosphere. Advice from Lady Fermoy did not arrive from a neutral figure. It came from a woman already associated with duty, judgment, and painful choices. Later, tensions surrounding the Wales marriage placed Ruth in another divided position. Her loyalty to the Queen Mother and her concern for Diana could pull in different directions. The collapse of the marriage was not only a national crisis, it reopened the question that had shaped Ruth's family life before. When marriage fails, where does loyalty belong? There is no need to declare that Ruth deliberately chose the crown over Diana in every moment. Evidence supports the existence of strain, not a complete map of her private motives. She had served the Queen Mother for decades, and that relationship would naturally influence how she understood the conflict. Diana, meanwhile, increasingly experienced the institution as unable or unwilling to meet her emotional needs. The two women may have looked at the same crisis through entirely different forms of duty. Ruth's courtly instinct favored discretion, continuity, and private endurance. Diana's survival increasingly depended on speaking, seeking recognition, and refusing to let the official version erase her experience. Neither position can be understood without the generation that produced it. That contrast does not make Ruth cold and Diana truthful in every dispute. It shows two women using different languages of survival. Ruth trusted structure. Diana sought connection. Ruth believed in the dignity of restraint. Diana discovered that restraint could become a form of disappearance. The custody battle involving Frances had already exposed the limits of Ruth's approach. By siding against her daughter, she may have believed she was protecting children, stability, or social order. The result included lasting estrangement and a family wound that followed Diana into adulthood. Duty had produced a decision, but not peace. Her later warning to Diana therefore carries an uncomfortable double meaning. Ruth may have understood the danger of royal life better than anyone in the family. But Diana may also have had reasons not to experience her grandmother as a secure emotional protector. Wisdom is harder to receive when it comes from someone associated with an earlier betrayal. This complexity is precisely what makes Lady Fermoy more interesting than either saint or schemer. She was not merely the loyal courtier who sacrificed her family to the crown, nor was she simply the brave grandmother who foresaw everything and tried to save Diana. She was a woman shaped by music, hierarchy, duty, family conflict, and decades beside the Queen Mother. She could organize one of Britain's notable regional festivals while maintaining a demanding court role. She could support art and public life while making a family decision that caused deep pain. She could deny arranging Diana's marriage while later accounts remembered her warning against royal life. Contradiction does not make her story false. It makes it human. The King's Lynn Festival offers one of the clearest views of Ruth outside the family conflict. She founded something rather than merely inheriting a position. The festival required initiative, taste, and persistence. The Queen Mother's patronage helped, but Ruth's work gave the institution shape. At the same time, artistic sensitivity does not guarantee tenderness in family conflict. People can understand music deeply and still make harsh decisions. They can value beauty while enforcing social rules. Ruth's cultural achievements should restore dimension, not excuse everything that followed. Her court service also deserves to be understood on its own terms. From 1956 to 1993, she remained attached to the Queen Mother's household. That span covered the marriages of the Queen's children, the growth of television monarchy, Diana's arrival, the wedding, the births of William and Harry, and the public separation announced in 1992. By the end of Ruth's life, the royal world she had entered had changed dramatically. The Queen Mother's court still valued old standards, but the institution around it was facing relentless media intrusion. Diana's popularity had created a new center of attention that no traditional household could fully control. For Ruth, this change may have been unsettling. The old model of service depended on private loyalty and public composure. Diana's conflict became public through biographies, interviews, leaks, photographs, and competing narratives. A courtier who had spent decades avoiding exposure now watched her family become one of the most exposed families in the world. Her death in 1993 came after Charles and Diana had formally separated. She did not live to see their divorce, Diana's panorama interview, or the final years of Diana's life. Any claim that Ruth predicted the entire outcome stretches the evidence beyond its limits. What she may have recognized was the first condition from which much of the later pain grew. Diana did not naturally belong to the emotional culture she was entering. That is different from saying Diana lacked royal ability. In public duty, she often excelled. The mismatch lay in private expectations, family humor, emotional expression, and the handling of distress. A woman can be brilliant at the public role and unhappy inside the private structure. Diana proved that these conditions can exist together. Lady Fermoy's warning, as later remembered, seems to address the private structure rather than public competence. That distinction satisfies one of the most persistent questions surrounding Diana's engagement. Did anyone see that she might not fit before it was too late? According to later biographical accounts, Lady Fermoy did express concern. She appears to have identified a difference in lifestyle and humor before the wedding, but the answer cannot be enlarged beyond the evidence. She did not leave a known written prophecy. She did not publicly challenge the engagement. She did not identify every cause of future breakdown. And she did not possess the authority to cancel a marriage chosen by two adults and welcomed by their families and the institution. Her warning also arrived within a relationship already burdened by history. Diana's maternal grandmother knew the court, but she had also stood against Diana's mother. That made her insight valuable and her protection incomplete. She could see the institution clearly while remaining difficult for her own family to trust. This may explain why the story feels more tragic than a simple missed warning. The problem was not merely that nobody knew. Someone may have known enough to worry. The problem was that knowledge existed without the relationships, evidence, or power required to change the course. Royal systems are often sustained by people who understand them deeply but speak carefully. Their knowledge is practical, private, and bound by loyalty. Lady Fermoy had spent decades learning when not to become the story. A public campaign against Diana's marriage would have violated almost everything her court role had taught her. She could offer a sentence. The institution offered a future. A sentence about difference was unlikely to compete with the Prince of Wales, a national celebration, and the belief that family background made Diana ideal. The title Woman of the Bedchamber placed Ruth close to one of the most experienced royal women of the century. Yet even that closeness did not give her control over the emotional decisions of the next generation. The Queen Mother could approve, families could hope, courtiers could advise, but Charles and Diana still carried their own needs and uncertainties into marriage. The lesson reaches beyond royalty. Families often mistake familiarity for readiness. A young woman may know the customs of a powerful family and still be unprepared for its private expectations. Older relatives may recognize danger, but speak in coded language, hoping a gentle warning will be enough. Sometimes the warning is too restrained. Sometimes the listener is too young. Sometimes the social rewards of proceeding are so enormous that doubt feels unreasonable. And sometimes the person offering advice has already damaged the trust required for that advice to be heard. Lady Fermoy's story contains all of these possibilities without proving any one of them completely. That uncertainty should remain part of the story. She knew the court, but the record does not show exactly how hard she tried to stop the marriage, whether Diana fully understood her concern or how others responded. Ruth Fermoy was not the secret architect of the royal wedding. She denied the matchmaking story. She was not documented as the full-time etiquette instructor shown in The Crown, although her experience made such guidance plausible. And she was not a prophet who foresaw every disaster. She was the grandmother who knew the household from within and who, according to later biographical accounts, believed its lifestyle might not suit Diana. She recognized the difference, but lacked the power, trust, and certainty to prevent the marriage. Her life also reminds us that understanding an institution does not make a person morally simple. Ruth's loyalty created achievement, continuity, and public service. It also existed beside a family history of fracture. She helped build a festival, served the Queen Mother faithfully, and made a devastating choice against her own daughter. The court rewarded discretion. Family life demanded tenderness, flexibility, and trust. Her record at court was steadier than the relationships within her family. That imbalance would echo around Diana, whose public gifts eventually exceeded the institution's ability to contain her, even as her private relationships remained painfully unstable. The warning about humor and lifestyle has survived because it appears to explain so much, but perhaps its deepest meaning lies not in prediction, but in limitation. Ruth could name the difference. She could not bridge it. Diana entered royal life with ancestry, beauty, youth, popularity, and 2 grandmothers who had served the Queen Mother. On paper, no young woman could have appeared more connected to the court, yet those connections belonged to older women in supporting roles. They did not teach Diana how to live as the wife of the heir while competing with an existing emotional bond and the demands of global fame. Cynthia Spencer had served quietly for 35 years. Ruth Fermoy had spent nearly 4 decades in the Queen Mother's household. Their success could make Diana's entrance appear almost inevitable. It also concealed how different her position would be. The grandmothers could stand behind royal women. Diana had to stand beside a future king. They were protected by defined duties and relative privacy. Diana's marriage turned her emotions, body, motherhood, clothing, and pain into public material. The family's long court history created confidence, but not a map for that exposure. Lady Fermoy's final importance is therefore not that she knew everything. It is that she may have seen one essential truth before the wedding. The institution could welcome Diana while remaining culturally foreign to her. A family can admire someone without knowing how to care for her. A household can prepare a bride for ceremony without preparing itself for the bride's emotional reality. That insight did not make Ruth a perfect grandmother. Her choices in Francis's divorce prevented any simple portrait of protection. Her loyalty to the Queen Mother complicated her position during the Wales crisis. Her denial of matchmaking prevents the public from turning her into the wedding's hidden designer. Her musical and civic achievements keep her from being reduced to one family dispute. In the end, Lady Fermoy stood between 2 worlds and fully belonged to neither story told about her. To the court, she was a trusted servant and friend. To Francis, she was the mother who testified against her. To Diana, she may have been both the grandmother who understood the palace and the woman associated with an old family wound. That is why her reported warning still matters. It came not from a distant critic of monarchy, but from someone who had served at its heart for decades. If Ruth truly believed the lifestyle would not suit Diana, the concern carried the weight of experience. But experience is not command, and warning is not rescue. The royal wedding went ahead. The world saw a fairy tale. Lady Fermoy returned to duty. Diana entered a life whose public splendor concealed private incompatibilities that no lesson in etiquette could solve. Ruth remained with the Queen Mother until her death in 1993. She left behind a festival, a long record of court service, a fractured family history, a denied matchmaking legend, and a warning remembered through later biography. None of those pieces alone defines her. Together they explain why she remains one of the most difficult and revealing women in Diana's family. She understood the palace well enough to know that belonging required more than ancestry. She understood duty well enough to remain beside the Queen Mother for decades. What she could not do was make duty and family loyalty point in the same direction. Lady Fermoy stood between Diana's family and the Queen Mother's household. But in the 1990s, another person occupied an even more difficult position. Robert Fellows was married to Diana's sister Jane while serving as the Queen's closest professional advisor. When the royal marriage collapsed, he found himself inside the palace and inside Diana's family at the same time.